good evening. This is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 12th of March. And what I'd like to talk about this evening is the rise of populism and the connection to the diminishing amount of money in the hands of the people on the street. Okay, so that's the topic of tonight, and a warm welcome back to all of you who are returning. And it's great to see any new visitors. Please like and subscribe below and join the conversation. Okay, so I picked up an article, actually a couple of articles, and one is about a staggering 75% of Americans believe in the America First policy when it comes to foreign relations, debt control, and immigration issues. And I've read in recent polls too that 75% of Canadians feel that the government is not catering to them or does not understand their concerns and is playing sort of lip service to what they feel are the real issues in the country. And so why is this happening? And why is there a connection to the dwindling money supply? And this is an important subject, and it's one I shall keep returning to because the mechanics of this system are so devastating. The money system that we operate right now, the fractional reserve system, it just grinds everybody into dust in the end. And you'll see from this other story that I found about the S-curve, which describes perfectly the Minsky moment and how the steam comes out of the sails of debt-driven growth. And you have to remember that we have been through 3 Minsky moments. There was one in 1972 that most people don't even realize, and that's why we came off the gold standard. There was a second one in the dot-com bubble when it burst. And in that third episode, which was the 07-08 housing crash, we've now had 3 separate episodes of quantitative easing, or basically money printing, buying up crap assets and paying above market value for them, and so the government takes on those crappy assets, hoping that at some point down the road they can sell them off for some kind of profit, which they won't be able to. So the dynamic that this fractional reserve system sets up is not very easy to see because it's so big. And of course, when you get down to describing it in simple terms, it simply is very hard to accept. And I believe it was John Kenneth Galbraith said, the ease with which banks create money is so simple, the mind is repelled. And repelled it is, it's very hard. I mean, I've been trying to take this on board since about 2000, the year 2000. And I'm only now feeling comfortable with this whole concept that fractional reserve is absolutely crazy. So let me bring this down to the simplest of terms to try and explain to you why there is a dwindling money supply in circulation. And it's not all because of plastic money or credit money, okay? So how I like to describe this is in terms of money has 2 portions to it. It has the principal portion and it has the debt portion. So if you imagine all the principal in the world as a bathtub full of water, completely filled to the brim, okay? So for every cup of water we put in payment, the bank takes out a cup and a percentage. And because of that very simple action, slowly but surely, all of the principal gets drained out into the bank's coffers, and all of the debt remains in the bathtub. And so all of a sudden you reach this stall point where nobody qualifies for debt, and so the banks are in this stuck position where they've got vaults full of cash, and yet they can't seem to get it out of the door. And that's where we are right now. We've reached the point they can no longer convert debt into assets to try and create more money, which they need to get out of the door to buy more assets, which is debt converted into an asset. Okay, so that might sound kind of strange, but let me give you a little example. And this is called the credit default swap. Okay, and now back in 2007, banks were running out of credit. They didn't have enough assets to underwrite the debts that they were taking on. And so, they were getting money from the Fed at incredibly low rates. and it was a boon time for them. It was a great way for them to make money on the backs of the public, by the way. And so they had to push this money out of the door, but they could only do it if they had enough assets to back those securities, that money creation. So they were running out of that, and so what they did was they went to AIG, the massive insurance company, and they said, will you insure our mortgages against default? Hence the term credit default swap. So what the insurance company did was they rated the risk on those mortgages. Now, insurance companies do not have the same financial backing requirements that banks do. They don't need the same kind of underwriting. So they did the risk assessment. So the banks went back to the boardroom and they sat down and said, well, hey, look, we've got a mortgage here. It was a liability, but it's now insured against default. So there are only two possible outcomes for us, and that is either A, the purchaser purchased the home and pays us all back and we get our money that way, or the mortgage goes bad and the insurance company pays for it. So if we can't lose money on this, it's not a liability, it is an asset. Okay, so they did a credit default swap and they turned a liability into an asset. And then they did mortgage-backed securities where they sliced up that asset into wafer-thin portions of the mortgage and stuck them with high-risk loans like auto loans, motorcycles, boats and that kind of stuff. Okay, because mortgages are very, very secure traditionally. So they've done everything they can with that. It's not possible for them to basically create any more assets out of liabilities. And so we have reached, I think, the final Minsky moment. And of course, this is why all the countries around the world now are seeing the same kind of deteriorating economic activity functions, and that's because there's not enough money on the street for people to buy enough goods to keep the economy running. Okay, so let's go and take a look at these clips, and we'll come back and I'll do a quick wrap up. Okie dokie, here we go. Okay, from Of Two Minds, here's the problem. The pie is shrinking. At that point, the only way to enable debtors to service their debts is to give them free money, i.e. Universal Basic Income, UBI. Scrape away the churn and distraction and the problem is simple. The pie of prosperity is shrinking and the fixes are failing. The status quo arrangement is based on the endless expansion of growth and debt, which is the monetary fuel of more and more and more of everything. More energy, resources, goods, services, jobs, wealth and income, all of which make up the elixir of prosperity. Prosperity is shorthand for a positive return on investment, ROI, aka primary surplus. Prosperity is the result of there being a surplus which can be distributed after capital, resources and labour are put to work. The higher the return on investment, the more surplus there is to distribute. When the surplus is bountiful, there's enough to go around for everyone to feel that life is getting better. But all systems eventually track an S-curve of rapid growth, maturation and depletion/decline, and surpluses diminish. The pie stops expanding and starts shrinking. There is less to go around, and suddenly the political squabbling intensifies as every elite and every constituency seeks to preserve their slice of the pie at the expense of others. This means shifting the losses of purchasing power and prosperity onto others without appearing to do so. Openly ripping a slice from the grasping hands of another elite or constituency will launch a protracted political battle, as every group will fight to the death to keep its share untouched. By far the best ways to shift the losses to others are 1. Inflation, reducing the purchasing power of their income, and 2. Creating phantom wealth that can be used to buy up all the income-producing assets. Unsurprisingly, this is precisely what we see happening globally. Even as inflation eats away at the purchasing power of wages, the government of the world carefully masks its reality behind bogus statistics of near zero inflation. While real-world inflation is between 7% and 10% in category after category, official inflation is logged at 2% or less. Wage earners are getting less for their money, and thus their prosperity is diminishing. This reality is further masked by bogus GDP statistics that are deployed as proof the pie is still expanding, when in fact only the slices of few are still expanding at the expense of the many. Meanwhile, the elites benefiting from financialization and leverage are reaping the immense rewards of inflating phantom wealth via credit asset bubbles. Since the return on investment economy-wide is stagnating, the trick here is to create money out of thin air and use that money to buy up income-producing assets. This inflates asset bubbles which further expand the financial elite's phantom wealth and allows them to keep buying more income streams. The trickery of creating phantom wealth enables the elites to increase their income and wealth well ahead of what's lost to inflation. Creating money out of thin air doesn't actually increase surplus or prosperity, it just shifts the losses to non-elites. Wealth and unearned income are concentrated in the hands of the financial elites, and the bottom 95% of those with earned income are slowly boiled frogs, only dimly aware that the purchasing power of their wages is declining, but at a pace just leisurely enough to avoid triggering a political rebellion. Depending on the expanding debt to fuel expanding prosperity has this funny feature called interest. Since earned income is stagnating or declining when adjusted for real-world inflation for the bottom 95%, interest payments, reduced disposable income, every dollar devoted to paying interest on rising debt is a dollar that can't be spent or invested. You see the irony. Depending on expanding debt for growth eventually chokes future borrowing, spending and investing, causing growth to collapse in a broken heap. Without more debt, growth is not possible in a world of stagnant earned income and credit asset bubbles. Central banks have played a game of reducing interest as a means of enabling debt to expand, even as the purchasing power of earned income declines, but the game ends at zero. At some point, borrowers can't even afford to make payments on principal, then default becomes inevitable. At that point, the only way to enable debt certs to service their debts is to give them free money, i.e. Universal Basic Income, or UBI. Don't kid yourself that the proponents of UBI are wonderful folks just trying to be generous. The only purpose of UBI is to enable debt certs to keep servicing their debts and stave off the day of reckoning when the debt bubble bursts and everybody wakes up to the reality that prosperity stops expanding a long time ago. Okay, so this is where we were in 1972. It was falling off. We were around about here. And so they took us off the gold standard and the debt continued and up it went. So we've had 1, 2, 3 of these stacked on top of each other to prevent stagnation and decline. This from Breitbart. Harvard-Harris poll, 3 in 4 voters favour America First immigration, trade, war platform from candidates. About 3 in 4 American voters favour a populist nationalist America First legal immigration, trade and foreign policy platform for candidates running for office that prioritises protecting the way of life and economic security of United States citizens above all else. The latest Harvard-Harris poll finds near unanimous support for populist nationalist candidates amongst Republicans, Conservatives and President Trump supporters, as well as a majority of support from all voters. Okay, so we're talking Democrats and independents here. The findings are the latest evidence that the open borders, globalization and endless wars ideology of former administrations, such as President George W. Bush's, has very little support with an American electorate. Voters were asked if they would be more or less likely to support a candidate who said, "We have a moral duty to create an immigration system that protects the lives and jobs of our citizens." The kind of populist sentiment often deployed by Trump. In total, about 75% of all voters. On trade, a total of 65% of voters said they would be more likely to support a candidate who touted imposing $250 billion worth of tariffs on China. On foreign policy, even when it comes to foreign policy and international affairs, Americans are vastly more likely to support candidates who oppose delegating more US sovereignty to global organizations and foreign interventionism that results in countless lost lives. Okay, and the numbers are pretty much similar for Canada. Okay, so this is from Fred, the velocity of money stock, M2. And you can see that compared to the 60s, 80s, 90s, 2000, and these actually, this is the dot-com bubble right here. This is the crash, started printing money, you see money's flying around, but since then, the money moving through people's hands has been diminishing. Okay, and here we are, this is right up to Q3 2018, and there's a little bit of an increase, but not much. This velocity of money is an important chart. It spells a lot of trouble when people aren't spending money. It spells trouble for the economy. Okay, so here, definition of populism in politics. Populism refers to a range of approaches which emphasizes the role of the people and often juxtapose this group against the elite. There you go. Emphasizes the role of the people. And of course, as I said, there are, terrible leaders who lead by that. Hitler, of course, is the popular choice. But I think we are looking at a people's revolution here. This is French Revolution time. It's a movement by the people, of the people, and for the people. And so fiscal responsibility and trying to return well-paying jobs to America has become very, very important to people. And the threat of illegal immigrants stealing those jobs, of diluting that job market. But again, all of that comes back to the money situation. The reason that we don't have enough money on the ground, the reason people don't have enough money to spend into the economy, is because of the fractional reserve monetary system, which creates inflation and ensures that it is a zero-sum game. So we have a federal election coming up in the fall, and what I would like to suggest that you do, wherever you are, your politician, you need to get them to assure you that they will take back control of the Bank of Canada. It is the public central bank, the only public central bank in the system, so it is entirely possible to do this, and we have the Bank of Canada do as it did from 1936 to 1972. The Canada behaved in this way. Okay, it lent money to the government at 0% interest, and the government spent it into circulation through infrastructure projects. And God alone knows we have potholes and bridges collapsing, the state of infrastructure, water pipes collapsing every year in every major city in Canada. We have all kinds of water treatment problems around James Bay and the indigenous communities. For God's sake, let's go back to what we were doing and fix this country up and put Canada back to work, with meaningful work, with decent pay, and no inflation. And really, until we do this is such a foundational thing. This is like trying to build a house on straw. Okay, it's going to collapse. It'll go up so high, but it will collapse. You need to build your foundation on good, solid ground. So if you've enjoyed this video and the information, please like, subscribe, comment below, and again, just my greatest of thanks for spending this time with me and listening to some of my opinions and thoughts. I'm just an everyday guy who is just looking at the world, trying to get by, and realizing that more or less we are all in the same situation. We're trying to put food on the table, clothes on our back, and keep a roof over our head. And I just think it's unconscionable that all of these bad decisions are taking place in front of our very eyes, and yet we don't seem to have a way to bring up the topic with our politicians. Okay, in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a great week, and we will talk to you very, very soon. See you now. Bye.